The Stoic View of the Afterlife. Opening story: the last day of a Stoic. The first light of dawn spilled through the window, casting golden streaks across the cold marble floor. An old man sat in a simple wooden chair, his hands resting lightly on its arms, his breath slow but steady. His body was failing, but his mind was as sharp as ever. A servant entered hesitantly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Master Seneca, the physician insists you rest." Seneca chuckled, his lips curling into a faint smile. Rest? When is all nature in motion? The rivers do not pause, the sun does not hesitate, the wind does not wait for permission to blow. "And yet you ask me to be still." The servant swallowed. He was young, still bound by the anxieties of the living. "But, Master, aren't you afraid?" Seneca turned to him, his eyes filled with something rare peace. "Afraid of what?" "Of what comes after," the servant admitted. Seneca reached out, placing a frail but steady hand on the boy's shoulder. "Ah, my friend, I have lived according to reason, to virtue. Death is not an exile, but a homecoming. I do not fear returning to nature, for I have never left it." That evening, with no trembling hands, no words of regret, no desperate grasping at life, Seneca closed his eyes. And when he did, he met death as one greets an old friend. What if we could all face the end with such peace? What did the Stoics believe about the afterlife? Unlike many religions, the Stoics did not weave tales of paradise or torment. They did not promise golden fields or lakes of fire. Instead, they offered something deeper, a way to live, so that when the end comes, we do not shrink before it, but embrace it with open arms. They left us wisdom, not speculation. And through this wisdom, we find three great truths. Death is a return to nature. A Roman battlefield, a final lesson. The air was thick with the scent of blood and earth. The cries of the wounded echoed across the field as the last light of day faded. Emperor Marcus Aurelius knelt beside a dying soldier, his fingers tightening around the man's trembling hand. "It's so dark," the soldier whispered, his breath uneven. "What comes next?" Marcus did not look away. "Nothing unnatural, my friend. Do you fear the setting sun? The falling leaves? Just as nature takes and gives, so too does life." A faint smile crossed the soldier's lips, and with that, he faded, returning to the very earth that once gave him life. The Stoic insight. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have embarked, you have made the voyage, you have come to shore. Now disembark." The Stoics saw death as no different than the seasons turning, the waves rising and falling. We are not separate from nature, we are it. And just as a tree does not lament the loss of its leaves, why should we fear returning to the universe that made us? Reflection: step outside. Feel the wind on your skin. Watch the trees sway. If nature does not fear change, why should you? What if the soul continues? The whisper of the cosmos. One night, under a sky alive with stars, an old philosopher named Cleanthes sat in quiet contemplation. Beside him, a young student spoke hesitantly. "Master, do you think we live after death?" Cleanthes did not answer right away. Instead, he lifted his hand toward the heavens. "Look up, boy. See those stars? Some of them died long ago, yet their light still reaches us. Even in death, they continue to speak." The student furrowed his brow. "So we live on." Cleanthes chuckled. Perhaps our souls, like the breath of the wind, scatter into the great whole. Or perhaps we are like those stars. Our light continues in ways we cannot yet see. The Stoic perspective. Some Stoics, like Cleanthes, believed the soul might persist in some form. Others, like Chrysippus, believed it dispersed like mist in the morning sun. Seneca took the middle ground. Death is either the end or a transition. If it is the end, it is nothing to fear. If it is a transition, then we shall meet again those who have gone before us. Exercise. Tonight, look at the stars. Imagine that, like their light, something of you remains, perhaps not in form, but in influence, in memory, in the lives you've touched. What truly matters? The afterlife we create now. The man who wanted to live forever. In the bustling streets of Athens, a wealthy man approached a Stoic teacher. "Master, I have built great monuments, gathered wealth beyond measure. How can I make sure my name lives on forever?" The philosopher smiled and gestured toward the market. "Tell me, who was the richest man in Athens 100 years ago?" The man opened his mouth, then fell silent. The philosopher continued, "But do you remember Socrates? The man who sought wisdom, not gold." The rich man nodded. "Then you see," the philosopher said, "we do not live on through marble statues or gold coins. We live on in the virtues we practice, the lives we touch. That is the only afterlife worth seeking. The true Stoic afterlife, your legacy." Marcus Aurelius reflected on this. "Soon you will be forgotten, just as those before you were. So do not seek recognition, but seek virtue." The Stoics did not concern themselves with an afterlife of the body. They focused on the only immortality that mattered, the impact of their words, their deeds, their character. Exercise. If today were your last, what would you leave behind? A kind word? A moment of wisdom? A lesson for those who follow? The final lesson, memento mori. In ancient Rome, victorious generals paraded through the streets to the roar of the crowd. But behind them, a slave walked, whispering, "Memento mori." Remember, you will die, not to frighten them, but to humble them, to remind them that all glories fade, that only virtue endures. Seneca advised, "Let us prepare our minds as if we had reached the very end. Let us postpone nothing. Balance life's books each day." The Stoic path is not about what happens after we die. It is about how we live before it comes. Final thought, a message from the beyond. If Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, or Epictetus could speak to you now, they would not waste words on what lies beyond the grave. Instead, they would ask, have you lived with wisdom? Have you acted with justice? Have you embraced hardship with courage? Have you disciplined yourself to be better than yesterday? For in these things you have already conquered death. Final words of wisdom. Do not fear death. Fear a life spent in triviality. Leave behind not gold, but wisdom. Prepare for death by preparing for life. Now, go and live with virtue.